Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I'm so happy to have as my guest Dr. Jeffrey Moss. Dr. Moss graduated from the University of Michigan Dental School in 1974 and then practiced dentistry up till 1985. Having employed clinical nutrition in his practice, he decided to use this experience and enter the professional supplement industry. For the last 25 years, he has operated Moss Nutrition, which supplies professional supplements to practitioners. Since 2000, he has served as an adjunct faculty at the University of Bridgeport Nutrition Institute, starting with vitamins and minerals class and also teaching the assessment in nutrition class to his teaching responsibilities. He also co-authored the Textbook of Nutritional Medicine with Dr. Mel Werbach, MD. And you can find out more at mossnutrition.com. Dr. Moss is going to share a very interesting topic with us today called Disturbances in Insulin Metabolism and Alzheimer's Disease. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Moss.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you started out as a dentist,
yes.
And people might say, that's a disconnect to move into nutrition. Tell us why that is not a disconnect.
Well, actually, it's a disconnect today, but actually the first really great clinical nutritionists, now we're going back about 100 years actually, were dentists. The first major supplement company was founded by a dentist, Standard Process, back in the late 20s, early 30s, Dr. Royal Lee. Many of the baby boomer older population who are listening might remember mentions of Melvin Page, the dentist, one of the great clinical nutritionists. So actually, dentists really were the first in the United States to really develop a genuine interest in the clinical utilization of nutrition. When I say clinical utilization, is basically not just looking at it in terms of a preventive standpoint, how we generally look at clinical nutrition, but how can we use clinical nutrition, supplements, diet to help people who are ailing?
Well, I think as well, if we look at more modern research, there's actually beginning to have a connection, recognized connection, of course it was always there, between what's going on in oral health and the whole rest of the body.
No question about it. Dentists did recognize that, and now the science is catching up, seeing this connection or what's going on. It's being found what is going on in the mouth, gum disease, tooth decay can have a systemic impact on the cardiovascular system, pulmonary system, GI system, and, of course, vice versa. What we see systemically can have a direct impact on creating dental disease.
Now, you're just our neighbor to the north because we're sitting here in the studios of WHPC in Garden City, New York, and you're at the University of Bridgeport, where they really have quite a big focus on natural medicine. Yeah. As part of that school, they have the naturopathic college and a chiropractic college and a dental hygiene school, which is one of the top in the country.
Yes. Yeah, it's really a great recognized institution, or little recognized institution. It's recognized certainly among many in the industry. I think the population at large, it's somewhat of an unknown, but certainly the various schools that you mentioned are really giving very high-quality educations and releasing very high-quality graduates, are really serving the public all over the world.
It's true, and they're lucky to have you there as a professor, right, our neighbor to the north.
I'm very honored to be there. I've been there close to, going on almost 20 years now. Started out in 2000, so it's been an honor to teach there.
Now, today's topic disturbances in insulin metabolism and Alzheimer's. That's another thing that might sound surprising, because when you think about Alzheimer's, you might not be thinking about insulin.
Precisely. It is changing. The awareness is increasing, but you're right. A general population at large standpoint, which would include the general population, the media, and many mainstream clinicians, and even many of the researchers, there is an unawareness, a lack of awareness of this connection.
Well, what do you think is commonly recognized concerning the cause of the ever-increasing number of people that are having something called Alzheimer's disease?
Well, the prevailing model is actually quite simplistic, and I think the best analogy I can give is going back 50, 60 years now, when the Framingham studies, we first started looking at cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, and we found this anatomic variance, if you will, disturbance. We saw in the coronary artery this stuff. Something was in there, and it looked like gunk, and we literally regarded it as gunk. The gunk was clogging up the pipes, and the blood couldn't circulate, and you got a heart attack. And so it was basically looked at as a purely mechanical, physical problem. And, of course, we know otherwise now, and that's another whole discussion, but we recognize that gunk is actually more like a scab, if you will, a healing process that basically has been gone on too much, too long, creating problems. Very similar analogy, a scenario can be described for Alzheimer's disease. We started seeing in the brains of these people with Alzheimer's disease gunk, if you will, plaques, different two basic types of physical abnormalities. One is called the plaquing, the other is known as an amyloid beta plaque, and what they call is a neurofibrillary tangle. This looks like a bunch of string tangled up in the brain. And the prevailing assumption right now, similar to when we first discovered the plaques, is that these physical abnormalities are the cause of the problem. And if we could just take away these physical abnormalities, Alzheimer's disease would be cured. Similar to what we thought about coronary artery disease, if we can just get rid of the gunk, take out the plaques, we'll get rid of coronary artery disease, and of course that was totally false.
Well,
so
I want to remind you.
Now.
I just wanted to remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Dr. Jeffrey Moss from mossnutrition.com. Dr. Moss, so let's continue that discussion. What is the problem with that simplistic belief, and where are we going now?
What we learned with coronary artery disease, we had to find out why this wasn't gunk that was building up, that basically you ate fat and the fat deposited in your coronary arteries, like in your drain. That was a totally inaccurate scenario that was portrayed. We found out it was a complex metabolic dysfunction, irregularity that had to be looked at from a lifestyle standpoint. It wasn't just you ate too much fat and it built up. It was basically, even though it was made of fat, it was a complex system of issues that were coming into play, largely related to many aspects of poor lifestyle, many aspects of poor diet. Probably the excess intake of refined carbohydrates were much more of an issue than eating too much fat. Lack of exercise, high stress, toxicology, poor gut function, etc. We found there's complex metabolic interactions. We're seeing the same thing with Alzheimer's disease, that this gunk, the amyloid plaques and the neurofibrillary tangles, are forming, and even though they are directly linked with the symptoms, the question is, why did they form in the first place? Just like coronary artery disease, it is a complex issue of various lifestyle imbalances, such as poor diet, such as lack of exercise, such as exposure to toxins, too much time in front of the computer, too much anger, not enough sleep, on and on and on. And what they do is they create two major metabolic imbalances. One is inflammation. Yes, inflammation. We know inflammation can be caused by an infection, for example. Inflammation can be caused by a lot of different things, including your thoughts, including poor diet, and all the things that I mentioned. But there's also another issue, and this is a disturbance in the hormone called insulin. Insulin, we all heard about insulin, of course, in terms of type 2 diabetes. We tend to think of it strictly in terms of diet, and that you eat too much sugar, too many carbohydrates, and you have too much insulin, or the insulin doesn't work right, and you get diabetes. Well, the hormone insulin get disturbances due to virtually any irregularity, any stressor, similar to what I talked about before. It's not just diet. You can think yourself into having poor insulin metabolism. But when insulin metabolism is disturbed, yes, as we know, it causes diabetes, and we tend to think of that, well, now you've got a bad pancreas. Well, it's more than we now recognize, going back to the coronary artery disease example, that people with coronary artery disease, well, they just have they're completely healthy people with a bad heart, and we know, of course, that's not true. When we look at people with coronary artery disease, there's a lot of things.
Well, that's why they're commonly calling it something like metabolic syndrome.
Precisely, exactly right. Same thing that we're seeing with diabetes. What we thought was just an illness of the pancreas, it's affecting the entire body. So when we see disturbances in illness in insulin due to poor diet and many other things, one of the things we'll start doing, it affects the metabolism of your brain. Grossly alters the metabolism of the brain. One thing many may be aware of, listeners are aware of, is that the brain basically feeds on glucose. That's its primary energy source. Well, it only works right if you have insulin telling the glucose where to go. It's really a team. Glucose goes where insulin tells it. And when insulin is imbalanced, it's giving aberrant messages, things get messed up in the brain. And one of the things that happens is the buildup of these two anatomic defects, the neurofibrillary tangles and the amyloid plaques.
There was some interesting research I looked at once where they showed that those tangles and plaques can be there. They have found often on autopsy, but no Alzheimer's. There was a very famous nun study years ago which looked at that as well.
You bring up a very important point. Going back to the heart disease scenario, the idea that you will always have heart disease if you see plaquing, they saw the same thing. Sometimes they opened up people who died at 100 years of age of renal failure, for example. They have heart disease in their life and they have plenty of plaquing. You're right. We find that the plaquing, the amyloid plaque and the tangles can be there, but is it direct cause and effect? It's associated, but is it cause and effect? Very often, no. It's a metabolic issue. We cannot be led down the mistaken assumption, mistaken path of thinking that if we don't see it, it doesn't exist. Just because you don't see it physically does not mean there isn't a metabolic imbalance much more powerful that is creating the symptoms.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moss. We're going to take a little break right here. You are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live or online at ncc.edu/WHPC or at iHeartRadio. For more information on today's guest or topic, email whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours will be right back.
Everybody buckle up. Buckle up. Buckle up. Buckle up. Everybody buckle up. Buckle up. Buckle up.